Good afternoon. My name is Adriana Link, and I am the head of scholarly programs at the American Philosophical Society. Welcome to the second day of the APS's virtual symposium on the promise and pitfalls of citizen science. We're so glad to have so many of you join us and rejoin us today. The American Philosophical Society resides in Lenape-Hoking, the homeland of the Lenape people, whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. The APS acknowledges with respect their continued presence and perseverance and expresses its sincere thanks for the past and ongoing generosity of numerous Indigenous communities and individuals who have offered their guidance, expertise, and opportunities for collaboration. This week's conference is inspired by the Society's 2021 exhibition, Dr. Franklin, Citizen Scientist, and expands on the exhibition's themes by exploring understandings of citizen science over time, placing historical initiatives in conversation with present-day projects like the one that you'll hear about today, as well as reflecting on the future needs and opportunities of the movement. For those joining us for the first time, the American Philosophical Society was founded by Benjamin Franklin in 1743. The Society is a catalyst for the discovery of new knowledge. Election to membership honors those who have made exceptionally significant contributions to science, the arts and humanities, and public life. The Society promotes research by providing over $1 million in research grants a year, primarily to younger scholars who need the support the most. Our library and museum collections and research centers serve scholars and visitors from across the globe. Please check out our website if you haven't already at www.amphilsoc.org to learn more about what we do and for news about forthcoming events. If you haven't been with us already, we are using Zoom webinar for today's conversation, so do not worry, you have all been muted. If you do have a question for our speakers, please use the Q&A button at the bottom center of your navigation bar. And just a reminder that you can type in your question at any time during today's conversation, and there'll be time at the end of the panel for questions with our speakers. We also encourage you to keep the conversation going online on the APS's social media using the hashtag SSAI. Finally, we're very pleased to offer closed captioning for this conference. If you would like to use it during the panel, please click on the CC box on the bottom navigation bar of Zoom. It is to the right of the Q&A button. With that, it is my great pleasure to introduce the speakers who will be participating in our very first Citizen Science Showcase, and we'll be doing 3 of these this week. And the topic of today's showcase is Transitions in Citizen Science with the GLOBE program during a global pandemic, shifting gears from data collection to data literacy. And here are our speakers. Marilé Colón Robles is the project scientist for NASA GLOBE Clouds and the principal investigator for the Cloud Gaze project at NASA Langley Research Center with Science Systems and Applications. She engages with students and teachers through the Global Learning and Observations to Benefit the Environment, or the GLOBE program, which is NASA's largest and longest lasting citizen science project about the Earth, with participants from over 120 countries around the world. She is the recipient of the 2017 Women of Color STEM Award for Educational Leadership, corporate promotion of education for her passion to expose as many students, and particularly those in underserved communities, to STEM, and has been recognized during multiple NASA Hispanic Heritage Month celebrations. Also joining us on today's session is Brian Campbell, who is a NASA Senior Earth Science Specialist with the NASA Hydrosphere, Biosphere, and Geophysics Laboratory and the Laboratory for Atmospheres at the NASA Goddard Space Flight Center's Wallops Flight Facility in Wallops Island, Virginia. Brian's work focuses on communicating with the world how NASA satellites view the Earth synoptically, bringing an understanding of how our planet responds to change. As part of the NASA satellite mission and programs, Brian has developed partnerships with students, educators, and researchers from over 75 countries. Finally, we'll be joined by Rusty Lowe, who is a senior scientist at the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies in Arlington, Virginia, and the science lead for the NASA Globe Observer Mosquito Habitat Mapper Citizen Science app. She works at the forefront of citizen science and its application to combat vector-borne disease such as dengue and Zika, working through NASA, NSF, and USAID projects in the US and overseas, she is demonstrating how educators, students, public health officials, citizens, and even space scientists can work together to identify mosquito habitats and develop critical mitigation strategies to reduce outbreaks of mosquito-borne diseases. And with that, I'm very happy to turn it over to our speakers.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. We're so excited to be with all of you. We're each going to present different portions of the GLOBE program. Particularly, we're going to talk about the GLOBE Observer app and the clouds, tree height, and mosquito habitat mapper observations. So a little bit about the GLOBE program. The GLOBE program has been around since 1995, and for this year on Earth Day, we're going to celebrate our next year. And it's composed of students and teachers and citizen scientists from all around the world, where they do observations of their environment. GLOBE started when teachers came together with scientists and came up with steps or protocols on how to make the observations so that researchers can use it in their studies. We've had a number of publications and a lot of great success. In 2016, the team started what's known as the GLOBE Observer app, and we hope that you have downloaded it as well. It's a free app, and it started with cloud observations, but we've increased it to make eclipse observations, mosquito habitat mapper, land cover, and tree height. And all you need is your mobile device, and that is all you need to make these observations. So just looking at clouds, the impact of the app has been immense, and particularly in data density. We did have a number of observations from the GLOBE schools, but once we opened it up to anybody around the world that can download the app, we had an increase in the data, in the data collection. And we're proud to say that we have observations in every single continent, and that includes Antarctica. Now, when we think of clouds, why does NASA want to study clouds? Well, about or close to 70% of the Earth is covered by clouds, and not all clouds are created equal. And so we need to keep track of these clouds and the cloud types. Now, with GLOBE Clouds and the team here at NASA Langley, we match every observation made through the GLOBE program to satellite data, and we match it to the Ceres instrument aboard Terra and Aqua satellites. We also match it to Calypso satellites and to geostationary satellites like GOES, Himawari, and Meteosat. And then each person receives a NASA personalized email with their observations matched to satellite data and an image of the satellite centered on their location at the bottom of the match table, which you see here on the left. We then use this data to then co-locate the satellites and then investigate different scenarios, like when there's subvisible cirrus or very thin cirrus clouds. We've also used it to study dust storms, different things, because our perspective from the ground looking up is very different from the satellite's point of view from the top looking down. And satellites are great, but they're not always perfect. So we always need those observations. Now, during the pandemic, we heard a big need from our GLOBE participants. And so one of the things that we started doing were these NASA at-home videos, where we show different activities that you can do to learn more about the protocols or the steps that you would do to collect data while you had to stay at home because it was unsafe to go outside. And these are still available on the GLOBE program's YouTube website or on the NASA videos as well. We tend to do data challenges where we want to investigate different scenarios. And we've tended to do these in the spring cloud challenges, dust observations, and I'm sorry that the GIF is not working, but Terminator observations that we're doing right now, or observations during sunrise and sunset to co-locate those to geostationary satellites. Contra observations are also a big one. Our eyes are the best detectors for counting these 3 types of contrails. So we're always doing these specialty observations or data calls for the public to participate in. But now, during the pandemic, we had to shift gears, and we developed family guides, and we did the 2020 Community Cloud Challenge, where there were different ways of participating in it. If you found that it was safe to go outside and make the observations, then you were welcome to make observations, but you could also watch a video from different NASA scientists who were very happy to participate, watch a how to do an activity like cloud in a jar, and different things like that. And this is how we transitioned so that people that were unable to go outside were still part of the program. We also developed new resources as the school started virtually, or what's called hybrid, some days face-to-face and some days virtual. In the GLOW program, we always invite students to be researchers and use the data for research. They tend to always collect their observations. So we made a student project support page showing them the ways where they can do research on the data that was already collected. So a little bit of a different way. And we also cleaned out the data a little bit so to be more helpful for the students and the teachers trying to do these research projects with their students. We also heard from teachers and families that they needed more video resources. So we made a Science of Cloud videos from those videos that we got from NASA researchers and from the activities. So in one page, you can find the science and then the activities side by side. And then you can watch it as a school group or as a family. And then we changed after the 2020 Community Cloud Challenge was over in July, then we adapted the choice chart to just be a family cloud challenge. So these were some of the ways that we adapted and heard the need of our group. We're still doing these observations, and we're still offering these different styles of, if you can go outside safely, you may do so, but these are all the other ways that you can participate. You can find them on our Globe Clouds page in English and in Spanish. Coming soon, we're gonna be doing a cloud project within Sooniverse. And Sooniverse is another citizen science project where it uses photographs and invites you to analyze what is in the photographs. So we're gonna be doing that here pretty soon, and you're gonna help us develop data quality flags for our data set. So this is a summary about clouds, and I'm gonna pass it on to Brian Campbell.
All right, thank you, Marilé. So yeah, so we're going to kind of shift a little bit to trees, even though, you know, trees, clouds, mosquitoes are all part of the NASA GlobeObserver Citizen Science Program. But we're going to talk about, you know, why tree height's important and why should we care. And then something coming up, you know, starting next week is the 2021 Trees Community Challenge. So we have the why is tree height so important, and why does NASA care, and why should you? So here's a couple things here, you know, a couple facts I like to throw out there. Tree height is the most widely used indicator of an ecosystem's ability to grow trees. Think of it this way: we have several, you know, lots of different biomes and, you know, environments across the planet. So if we look at something like a rainforest, rainforest is a great and ideal place to grow trees. You have the right temperature, you have the right climate, the right precipitation, the soil is fertile and, you know, organically rich. But then you look at a desert. Desert, not the greatest place to grow trees. The soil is mostly sand, doesn't allow water infiltration or percolation very well, and there's lots of times flash flooding. But then also we have, you know, a hot, dry, arid climate, so not the best. So, but where you see tree heights that are, you know, prevalent, where you see lots of trees, that's a really healthy environment to grow trees. Pretty self-explanatory. Another thing that's self-explanatory, tree height allows you to grow allows you to track the growth of trees over time. Everyone has some type of story about a tree, whether it's when you planted as a child and you've seen it grown through the years, or you work with students and planted trees, or if you work with a group that goes out and plants trees for the environment, things like that. You're able to track how fast these trees are growing over time, okay? And that's something we can do with the NASA Globe Observer and citizen science. We can track those trees by just using a mobile device to measure the height of trees. Why is that important for NASA is that at NASA, scientists have the space-based observations from missions here that you see this satellite in the picture called ICESat-2. This is a satellite that uses a laser altimeter in space to measure the height of things on the planet, from ice to bodies of water to sea level rise, all these things, to mountains. But it also can measure tree canopy height. It can essentially measure the height of individual trees as well as larger collection of trees in a particular area. But when tree height measurements are taken in space and on the ground through citizen science specifically, when we get a tree height, scientists can figure out, based upon that tree height, about how much carbon dioxide that tree or trees pull in from the atmosphere and potentially sequester or store. Okay, super important for understanding our planet's carbon budget. Then also, as I mentioned, we have missions like ICESat-2 that help us figure out tree heights from space in areas that we might not be able to get to. Of course, with citizen science, we won't be able to hit every tree on the planet. Impossible, right? Even with ICESat-2, we won't be able to hit every tree on the planet because there's things out there that Marilé loves so much. Those are clouds. Clouds can cause a problem when it comes to using a laser altimeter in space, because clouds contain water droplets. Cirrus clouds can contain ice. So they can contain all these things that can cause issues with the laser pulses penetrating the clouds and travel down the earth. That's another reason why we need citizen science observations from the ground. And this is just showing you just a quick GIF that popped up here. Scientists use tree height to calculate the amount of trees carbon trees store. Yep. So where are all these tree heights coming from? If we look here on the left side, these are all the citizen science tree heights that have come in from the GLOBE program over the last several years. All these pictures that you see are focusing, you can see in the United States and globally, these are coming in from the citizen scientists, students, teachers who are all citizen scientists, adults, children who are playing, doing the app with their parents. They're coming in from all over. Each one of these pictures represents a basically point of data for citizen science. And we have a program that I'm the lead for called the Trees Around the Globe Student Research Campaign. We're in the third year of this mission, this campaign, and we have over 60,000 observations coming in from trees, from other things that we look at, land cover, which is something you can also do on the app. And as you know, trees are part of land cover, so land cover is a super important thing as well. But this Trees Around the Globe Student Research Campaign really helps us focus on collecting the data, but then having students understand what that data means and where it was taken, why it was taken, how they can be compared to the ICESat-2 satellite and other missions, globally. And I have this graphic up here in the top right that's showing you the four major protocols in the NASA Globe Observer. And Marilé talked about clouds. Rusty is going to talk to you about mosquitoes. I'm talking to you about trees, but I'm also going to mention land cover because that is a super important part of it. So, when we go out and take tree height observations, we also would love for people to take land cover observations as well, because trees are part of land cover. And by understanding the land cover around a tree, you really help to build that data set to be much more robust. But then you have what also Marilé mentioned as something called data density. With the data density, you see all the cloud observations that came in. We are trying to replicate that. We probably won't get as many tree height observations and land cover observations as clouds. They're not as cool looking as clouds, but we really want that data density to really be something that we can help focus on. And we work with different campaigns around the world, including the European Phenology Campaign and the Mission Mosquito. So here is a way that we take citizen science and we can compare it to ICESat-2. This is an extension of what you can do. And I won't go into this in detail, but this is showing you this large graphic here is showing you when I went and took a tree height observation and I found out the tree that I was measuring was 18.93 meters. And I found out also that ICET2 measured this as well. And it found it at 19.66 meters. Combining those two, looking at those two observations and comparing them, you can see the citizen science data and the space-based data is super close in detail. And this is done on something called Open Altimetry. It's a website, an online tool. The link is in the chat that you can actually use. You can compare the globe data to the ICET2 data, and it really helps citizen scientists, students, everyone understand why this data is important and how it's important in the real world. So this is looking at an isolated tree. I said ICET2 can measure isolated trees potentially and groups of trees. Groups of trees is a little tricky because it's going to, if there's a lot of trees in a small area, it's going to measure or send back the average height of all the trees in that particular area. This happens to be one that I measured in my neighborhood where ICET2, one of the laser photons hit just that tree. There was nothing else in that, what's called a laser photon footprint on the ground. So we were able to measure an isolated tree. Then I did a comparison to the ICET2 data. This is just a way to extend it. So how do you become involved with this? Since we're focusing on, with this talk about data literacy, we know that we're in a pandemic, right? We know that a lot of people all over the world, not everybody can go out. There's lockdowns. You know, I think France just went into the 3rd lockdown. They don't want people out and about taking observations. But if you can, that's great. If it's easy to do so, that's great. But when you're talking about that, there's lots of data out there that you can use that's already there if you can't take measurements. And that's all part of data literacy, understanding what that data is about. And this is just a little graphic that my friends at Alteryx, sent me and shared with me that, data literacy is not just understanding the data in one level, it's understanding it in all these different things, from decision making to understanding what the language of the data is saying, what the fundamentals are that go into data collection and data analysis, things like that. So we have something called the Globe Trees Family Guide, which we just released a couple weeks ago. And it's a website that you can go into to learn more about trees as a family based upon your learning level, from sapling, you'll see here on the left. This is all the way that basically lower level elementary to basically younger students to lower level elementary. And then we have the seedlings, which are upper elementary into middle school. And then we have the sprouts, where the science gets a little more sophisticated. That is high school students and adults. So we have this family guide that's going to stay up there for a long period of time on the website, where you can learn, more intimate things about trees. You'll get a little more detailed. And as you go through these journeys, these age groups, you're going to see the asks and the observing creates a little more detail. So that's going to stay up there for a while, okay? As long as we can keep it up there and people interested in the family guide. But a short-term thing is something that's starting next week. From April 15th through May 15th of this year, we have the 2021 Community Trees Challenge, where first we would love, if it's possible, to go out and take tree height observations using the NASA Globe Observer app, okay? Using that trees tool on the app. If it's not, we have a similar feel here that you can go in and learn all about trees. If you're able to take the measurements, that's great. Then you have this resource as an added bonus where you can learn all about trees. You can watch some of the NASA and Globe videos created about trees. You can learn how to make a video and share it. If you're into the artistic side of things, you can write tree puns or poems or songs about trees and share them with the rest of the Globe community. And you can do this, as part of this. And the website is there. But this Trees Community Challenge is basically, it was supposed to happen last April, but since we were in the pandemic, we had to postpone it until this year. So we're hoping to get a really good results from this. Lots of data coming in and lots of people learning all about trees. And here's our challenges to you. If it's safe to go out and take tree observations, do it, okay? We want you to also, as I mentioned, if you take a tree height observation, as a citizen scientist, take a land cover observation as well. If it's not safe to go outside, we do have these resources available for you from the Trees Community Challenge website and also the Trees Family, the the family guide. And here are just a bunch of associated tree links that were shared throughout. And with that, I will stop and pass it over to my great colleague, Rusty Lowe.
Thanks so much, Brian. So I'm Rusty, and I'm going to be talking today about a third citizen science tool on the NASA Globe Observer app. And for me, this quote by Ben Franklin really communicates the values that we as citizen scientists share as a community, to be generous and contributing and sharing our knowledge. So I'm going to do right now is I'm going to tell a story that actually Ben Franklin was part of. Back in Ben Franklin's day, natural philosophers shared their science not through the web, right, but through scholarly correspondence. And that's what he did back in the mid-century that eventually was used by one of the scientists that dealt with the 1793 yellow fever epidemic. So here's the story. It was hot. It was the hottest summer in years. Humidity was barely tolerable. And the swamps around Philadelphia were teeming with mosquitoes because, as we know, mosquito populations respond to climatic conditions. And the air smelled bad and people got sick. 1 in every 10 people died. So more than 5,000 people died during this epidemic. The epidemic was yellow fever, and the yellow fever was an epidemic which plagued the early colonies and the early United States for the better part of 3 centuries. We have, but the first big one was in Philadelphia. So during that time, in the 1600s to about the 1900s, people thought that yellow fever was caused by miasma, which is bad air, right? But we know that this disease is now transmitted to humans through something called the yellow fever mosquito. This mosquito is an invasive mosquito. It doesn't belong in the United States. It comes from Africa. It hitchhiked here to the Western Hemisphere in water barrels during the transatlantic human trade by enslavers. And it's been hitchhiking now between continents for hundreds of years, along with its cousin, the Asian tiger mosquito. Both these mosquitoes are really dangerous. And the Aedes aegypti, the yellow fever mosquito, evolved from raising its young in tree holes, a natural container. And at some point in their evolutionary history, they found out that people made really, really great containers, manufactured containers that they could raise their young in. So they use water bottles, and they have used barrels. They have traveled across the ocean in old used tires, in lucky bamboo. They are all over the place. And it's been a big problem. Now, next one, please. This is our, so we had this problem with yellow fever, right? And it happened that around the 1950s, we had DDT, 1945 or so, we had DDT, and we completely eradicated the yellow fever mosquito. And it was gone for several decades. But in about 1970, it started coming back again. So we've had 200 years since we've had an epidemic in the United States, but you can see in this upper map here, this is where that yellow fever mosquito is now residing. It came back after 1970, and it's now established again. And as climate is changing, it's moving its range northward. And the bottom map shows you where we expect to see these mosquitoes in the future. Okay, next one, please. So yellow fever, once eradicated in the US, is now potentially a threat in our country. So you may recognize the name on this article that was published, Anthony Fauci, right? It's now a household name, but he published this article about 4 years ago about how we have to worry about yellow fever again, because we have this Aedes aegypti, and Aedes albopictus, these bad invasive mosquitoes. And it's such a big problem because you can't just spray like we usually do to get these, because they live in little containers all over the place. We need citizen scientists to find, report, and destroy these habitats, to protect communities from disease, and even to promote environmental justice so that even underserved communities have health. And the most important thing to recognize is, while those female mosquitoes taking a blood meal are dangerous to humans, the larvae, the young, are perfectly safe. Next one, please. So this is what you do with the Globe Mosquito Habitat Mapper. You go find those places where mosquito babies are found, in old tires, in sewers, in bird baths, water storage tanks. You can even find them sometimes in a bottle cap. Any place that there is still water is a potential site for a mother mosquito to lay her eggs. So you can see why it's a problem that no municipality can solve. People have to get involved. So we've got an app for that. And the app is the Globe Observer Mosquito Habitat Mapper on this platform. And what citizen science do is they report where and when they find immature mosquitoes. So you dip some water, you look to see if there are any larvae. They're macroscopic, so you can see them. And then you just match the icon in the app to where you found those mosquitoes. Next one. So in fact, our app asks for 5 different tasks. The citizen scientists can do all of them or just one of them, but it asks where and when, what habitat did you find, how many mosquito larvae did you find, what kind of mosquito larvae, and did you actually dump out the water so that that water cannot be used for mosquitoes to hatch and become dangerous ones. Okay. So you're listening to the story. It's pretty compelling. Yeah, but NASA science makes sense for clouds. I said it makes sense for trees. But what about mosquitoes? You can't see mosquitoes from space, right? But back to the original story. We don't see mosquitoes from space, but what we can see from space are those environmental conditions that mosquitoes like. The hot conditions, the high humidity, plenty of precipitation, the kind of land cover that they like, that we can see from satellites. And so that is why NASA is interested in mosquitoes. So here's a recap here that we can make, you as citizen scientists can make that connection between mosquitoes that you see on the ground and those satellite images that we get from space. Okay, next one. So let's compare citizen science yesterday and today. In Ben Franklin's day, the citizen scientists collected a lot of data. In fact, in New England, we have more weather data than any other place in the Western Hemisphere, largely because of the Philosophical Society. Today, volunteer environmental mentoring can be done by all. Then they record it in diaries. Now it's uploaded to apps. Then it was shared through scholarly correspondence. Now it's shared through open data archives. The Globe data is open and anybody can get it. And in the old days, people might have gone to Philosophical Society meetings. And today we do that as well, but we also use social media and we do use web-based collaborative research tools. All right, so the next one. So getting back to how we actually use data during the pandemic, we've had these amazing technological changes that have allowed for some amazing developments. And one of the things that has happened is that we have not only citizen science data, but we have open source data platforms. We have web-based satellite data that's available for acquisition analysis. We've got social media to talk. And all these things made it possible during the summer of 2020 to do a collaborative research project with 74 students all around the country during an epidemic. And I would argue that Ben Franklin, we talk about him as the father of citizen science, but I really think that his vision goes further to what we're seeing now, which is open science, which is something which is now revolutionary, which is really revolutionary for science in general. And so what I'm hoping is, and this is the last slide, that after this presentation, you'll see mosquitoes, but more importantly, I hope you'll consider joining our community of NASA Globe observers and take this app out with you when you go outside and record clouds and land cover and trees and mosquitoes and be generous in your science with the rest of the world. Thank you so much.
Great. I'm going to invite our speakers to rejoin the conversation. So that was really wonderful, and so many great connections to projects that we have going on at the APS. So thank you so much for putting that all into perspective. And there's some great questions coming in the Q&A. And I encourage those of you who haven't had a chance to ask questions yet to put those in as well. So I want to start, and I think, Rusty, you started to get at this a little bit at the end, given the title of today's presentation, which is really about framing how Globe has adapted their programs during this pandemic. So you've talked a little bit about how you've been able to translate those programs online, but what has the response been to your adaptations for at-home observation? I don't know if you could maybe talk a little bit more about how you see people engaging with your work, perhaps differently, either for better or worse now than before we all were in lockdown.
Mm-hmm. I think that Marilé and Brian can talk a little bit more about those family guides, because those have been well developed. Our focus was really because we had a initiative to reach out to diverse students around the country and provide them with a research opportunity in the summer. And then we had to do that virtually. Well, I think that what we saw was that initially the students were like, oh, dang, I don't want to do this at home. I want to travel to NASA and I want to, hang out at Johnson Space Flight Center. And that just wasn't possible. And so when we did our evaluation of this collaborative experience where they were all where they could, those that collected data did, those that couldn't just analyze data, but then we put that all together and then they did science projects. And what we found was that they were like, at first, I really thought that this was going to be bogus. Like, a virtual science internship, give me a break. And just about without exception, they couldn't believe how compelling it was, how easy it was to do research from home, and that we have now all these, the infrastructure of citizen science combined with the scientific data acquisition and analysis tools that have been sponsored by NASA and other scientific organizations. You don't need to go to a brick and mortar institution anymore. And so that was really profound. So I think maybe the others can say something a little bit more about how the families responded.
Yeah, so with the family guides, we've had a lot of success, particularly from families, but also from camps. Camps were having a hard time because some of them had to do it virtually. And then throughout the summer, they opened up. So they were looking for activities. If you notice, some of them helped us with the videos. And right now, today, the activities are still helping the parents that are still at home. We're seeing at NASA with interns, a high number of more women participating because they don't have to leave the home to be able to be a NASA intern in any of the NASA centers. And they're using these activities to interact with their families and share with them a little bit more all the things that NASA does. It's not just rockets or engineering, we also study the Earth. So it's been successful, and we've seen a lot of different groups that we didn't think about in the beginning using it. And Globe does the International Virtual Science Symposium, and it just occurred. And we were a little bit nervous about, are we going to get projects going on? And each campaign did their best of showing how to use the data that's already been collected and how to bring it into a local project using maybe climate data, like My NASA Data. My NASA Data brings in different satellite data from NASA, and it gives you more overview. So bringing in different data sets, and I think it was really successful. We had a huge number of projects coming in where, again, they adapted. Instead of collecting their own observations, they used the data already collected by others and then added other data sources.
Yeah, I think it's a good, that's great. And, with as Marilé mentioned, we wanted to figure out, how, with the Trees Around the Globe Student Research Campaign, how students could take the data that was already out there if they weren't able to go out and take observations, because a lot of the Trees campaign, there are approximately 53 countries that are participating in that campaign directly. And there were a lot of countries during the last year of the pandemic that they were in, a lot of times they were in lockdown, so they couldn't go out and take observations. So students went into the GLOBE database, they went into the NASA, looking at the NASA data, did comparisons and used that already existing data to help build that data literacy. They were taking the citizen science data from all over the world for GLOBE. And that, and then also, we were kind of expecting, when the pandemic hit, that we were going to see a lot of the measurements, a lot less measurements coming in, but we saw a lot of measurements still coming in. So, and, we put out a lot of disclaimers, don't go out and do this if you're not supposed to do it. But, some of us are part of a team where we go in and approve, we look at the photos to approve to make sure that they're, good photos and that there's things that not identifying features and things in the photos, all those things. And there were a lot. I mean, there were thousands and thousands of those a week that came in. And, I happened to do it Monday. And I remember, it was back in May. It was like, oh, we probably won't get a lot in. And I went in, there were 6,000 of them came in over the weekend. And I was like, holy cow. I guess people aren't staying in. But then it got to the point, I think, where a lot of people wanted to be outside and they were finding ways to, do it safely, to go outside and take these observations. So, but yeah, it's a combination of things we noticed. We noticed, there were people out taking data, they were doing it safely, but then as Marilé mentioned, we were having students and other folks work with the data that was already out there.
Yeah, and can I
Sure.
add, with clouds, we were more lenient in letting people make observations from their terraces or from their apartments.
Yeah.
And because of all the air quality events that were happening, we have some really good before and after photographs. So through the clouds portion, we focus on clouds, but there are people that use it to report haze, smoke from nearby fires, dust storms. So we got quite a number of observations of haze, and you can see the visibility changing because they're taking it, let's say, from a sixth floor of an apartment complex, and you can see it day by day. So it's been really interesting to change the adaptation of letting people do observations from a balcony or from their houses, and then the added data of air quality that we weren't expecting.
That's great. So do you have a good sense of how much of this data is actually being used on a daily basis? I mean, it seems that you're just gathering so much information, and some of it I'm sure has been historical data that's been useful as well. But do you have a sense of how this data is being used on a day-to-day? Who's using it? Is it predominantly scientists? Is it pedagogical purposes? Can you talk a little bit more about who's using the data and how?
I can start with that one. We just had the International Virtual Science Symposium, and there were more than 200 people that were using GLOBE data. And I think we had 40 people that actually used mosquito data. With respect to mosquito data, we're actually collecting data that's never been collected before. And it is really, really important. We are working with the President's Malaria Initiative in Ethiopia. They have a new invasive species that, just like the yellow fever mosquito, actually lives in containers. And it's the first container species for malaria. And so they're using our app in order to identify those places. So that's really a game changer. And so that's that. We are also working on another National Science Foundation project where we are creating a artificial intelligence to identify larvae automatically. And to do that, you need to have lots and lots and lots of photos to train the algorithm. And those photographs are coming from citizen scientists. So those are two of several other ways I can describe the ways that scientists are using these data, but it is very, very important. So.
Yeah, and with some of the, other than like the students using it as part of the Trees Around the Globe student research campaign and their student research projects, we do have folks on the ICET2 team who are actually looking at the tree height data and doing some comparisons. A lot of the scientists who work on, directly with the ICET2 team or affiliated with the ICET2 team at, doing university research, they're looking at the tree height data, doing some comparisons in order to build that that space-based and ground-based data, database, that much more robust database for that data density, as we mentioned several times. So that's a big thing. One of our goals, of course, is to not just have the researchers look at the data, look at the mosquito data, look at the cloud data, look at land cover and tree data, but to use that in their research and then potentially publish, articles, manuscripts, and professional journals citing this data, which is, all this data is accessible to anyone, to NASA scientists, to students. The GLOBE database, all the NASA data is free, okay, because it's paid for by, the taxpayers. So all the NASA data out there is free access, but there's so many different ways to do it. You can look at the raw data, you can look at the visualized data. There's different online tools you can use, the NASA online tools, external partner online tools. You can pull the NASA data and use it in that. So there's many different ways the scientists are using it. They're using it with online tools. They're grabbing the raw data, creating their own models, things like that. As your specific question is how it's being used every day. We don't have really idea of how it is every single day, but we know of kind of that overarching perspective and what the scientists, want the data for. And that's how we design, the app, that we want it so that scientists can actually easily find where the data, and on the GLOBE system, they can look at the data via the visualization system, the advanced data access tool, or an API. So there's different ways for the scientists to get the data depending upon the level of, sophistication they'd like.
Yeah, and with the clouds tool, we produce data sets that have the ground cloud observations with all the satellite data also matched to it. And so it's one of the few resources where you don't have to search for individual data sets. We'll have the Aqua, Terra, geostationary, whatever was matched to that data set available on the Globe Observer website, which I shared there. And so what we found with clouds is it's the same story, right? There's students using it. There's a lot of universities also using it. There's some groups using it to train first and second year undergraduate students on how to do research and how to use AI or artificial intelligence, particularly with the cloud images. So that's been very interesting. One of the projects that they're working on right now is identifying thunderstorms and thunderstorm tops. Our call right now for Terminator observations, and yes, I want you to think of the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, but the solar Terminator is that line between the sky or the daylit Earth to the night side. And certain channels in the GOES data set have a hard time identifying cloud types. And that's why we're asking right now for observations within an hour of sunset or sunrise where you're at. And we are going to hire a NASA intern during this summer in June to analyze that data set and do those comparisons. So we do a lot of satellite comparisons with the cloud observations. We've also found a lot of dust reported because you can take photographs of the sky with the app. A lot of people have reported dust storms in Southwest US, in the Mediterranean area. We get a lot of observations from the Canary Islands. So we've gotten a lot of interest from the World Meteorological Organization on these things, because sometimes it's cloudy and satellites cannot detect the dust storms. So there's different ways that it's being used. And how I was saying also, we have all these smoke and haze observations as well. These could be more indirect observations, but this is why we want to start putting these photographs in the Sooniverse platform so that people just like you can go in, annotate, and give us more reference data, more information to make the data set that we're already producing even more useful for researchers, for students, for anybody that wants to use the data.
That's great. So there's questions, and I think we've started getting at this a little bit about sort of what are the opportunities and challenges of working with different kinds of audiences, individual scientists versus large communities of researchers and stay-at-home parents who are working with their kids. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit if you've had opportunities to work with artists, writers, or musicians, and then also to hear about what kind of methods do you use to translate or to make accessible the data that you're working with, especially for pedagogical resources. And I was thinking, Rusty, during your remarks, we have our education staff at the APS is a really great program that they do specifically on yellow fever. So, can you talk a little bit, and I'll connect you with them after we're done.
Okay, sounds great.
But if you could talk a little bit about what strategies you use to make it accessible to wider audiences, I think people would be interested to know.
So music, I can't speak to, although I do have a collaborator at Stanford that has the A Buzz app, where citizen scientists will actually hold up their phone and record the buzzing sound of mosquitoes, and they can use that to actually identify the mosquito. And you can download that as a ringtone. So that's the only connection I have to music. But I know that graphics that are, art is a one way that we really do communicate science well. And there is, in fact, a movement in STEM education for STEAM, which is bringing art in. And I have been working closely with a graphic artist here where I live in Boulder, Colorado. And we've developed a lot of products for Globe Observer Mosquito Habitat Mapper that actually uses art as a way to communicate to our audiences. We also have a Zika zine. We have a zine that can tell people how to use the app. And I would recommend you to go find that because it's quite compelling, I think. So yes, I think that all these different modalities are great ways to communicate. And we know that, graphics, graphs communicate, tables communicate, text communicates, but so do these other creative expressions. So that's a really good question. And I just wish we could do more of it. We just have kind of a limited budget, but when we can, we do try to always include our creatives in this work.
One of the things that with clouds we've been able to do, so if you go to the Family Cloud Challenge and the Science of Cloud videos, you'll see the activities. And a lot of them, some of them are kinesthetic. So you might see me doing a cloud dance to go through the 3 cloud types with my girls. But we've also developed a tactile cloud chart. So you use whatever materials you can find of what would be a cumulus cloud that's puffy or thick, what would be a cirrus cloud, which is more thinner and feathery. And this was done of work by a teacher intern. Teachers can be NASA interns as well. And we've used it with blind students. And with the students, they made their own cloud chart with the tactile materials, and they were able to interact with me talking about opacity or which clouds would cause shadows, which clouds would let more light through. So the kinesthetic or the tactile, using your materials, it's artistic, but it also brings in the diversity and letting other groups that might not be able to just look in the sky or look and do observations, but to use their abilities and still participate and be part of the science communication.
So yeah, as part of the trees family, Globe Trees Family Guide, we have, in part of the activities in there, we have, these type of activities like, if you're on the more artistic side, how can you learn about trees, but then what you're learning about trees, can you convert that into, or translate that into like poems or writing a song or things like that. We have created some activities to allow you to be able to do that on the Family Guide. And one thing that we pride ourselves in is with the Trees Around the Globe Student Research Campaign is we don't only focus on just the science of trees. We focus on the personal connection of trees, the cultural connection of trees. For instance, we had a presenter last year from the Salish tribe present on how the students they were working with in the tribe were actually taking tree observations, but then they gave a part of the presentation on what do these specific trees, these tree species, mean culturally to their tribe, to their native tribe. So that's definitely an audience that, you know, that a lot of folks don't, you know, think about when they're talking about looking at the science of things. You know, when you're talking about, you know, looking at the cultural aspects of, you know, trees. I'm sure, you know, a lot of the indigenous groups around the world, they have specific, things looking at clouds and different critters on the planet. You know, they all have these different cultural relevance. So yeah, so this is a big thing we do with trees is we learn about the science, yes, but we also want that personal connection to be known, the cultural connection about trees, so we can hit those more diverse audiences.
That's great. And we're slowly running out of time. I wish we had more time to talk. This is wonderful. So I do want to end, your focus is global in scope, but I think our conversation today has really highlighted the extent to which it's both a local, your projects are both locally based as well as globally based. So, can we talk a little bit maybe to end about, what challenges have you faced in framing these as global projects? Is there participation for certain projects more from certain parts of the world than others? Have you seen that in your work? And then I also wanted to ask, just because I'm curious, as people working on mosquitoes, trees, and clouds, how have those kind of areas of focus changed your perspectives as citizens in this global environment and how you see the world?
I'll start first with that one because it seems like it's a really important point for me to mention that when I first started doing the mosquito thing, I just thought about mosquitoes. And rapidly, I realized that mosquitoes and understanding where the habitats are in space doesn't mean much unless you situate it in the landscape. And so now when we ask people to do the mosquito habitat measurement, we also ask them to do land cover and trees if they can, and then clouds, so we can understand the images that we see, the spectral data that we get from space. So I am no longer as stovepiped as I was. Okay, I'll pass it on now. I just wanted to say that I am the new convert for that.
So, okay, yeah. So a couple things, where we see it coming, since it's a global thing, GLOBE stands for Global and Learning Observations to Benefit the Environment. So, there's a combination of, we have certain countries as part of the GLOBE program that submit more data than others. Strangely enough, the country of Croatia is always at the top because the country of Croatia has adopted a lot of the GLOBE protocol measurements and observations into their country's curricula. So a lot of the teachers from all over the country are using that. United States, not so much. I mean, the United States is guided by, a lot, the specific goals and objectives, things like that, next gen and all that. But, a lot of the US groups are doing it. But the one thing that we want to really focus on is as you mentioned, Adriana, is that, yes, it's a global program, but we really like to focus what's happening locally in order for people to understand what's happening in their real world, and then they can share that real world application to the rest of the planet. Think of it this way, if you have a group taking, mosquito observations in, the same latitude in the United States as a country in Europe, they may see the same thing. They may not see anything even close, but that's why it's important to share. Yes, we're getting global observations, but those folks need to know what's happening, maybe, 5,000 to 6,000 miles away, but they're in that same latitude because, it's a global thing. Mosquitoes are a global thing, right? Trees are all over, clouds are everywhere. They connect us, right? So we're really looking at that perspective. So yes, it's a global program, but we're seeing that understanding these local observations really help to benefit, the real world perspective for students, citizen scientists, everyone.
Yeah, for clouds, we get observations. A lot of the observations are from North America and Europe, but there's interesting hotspots that have been coming up particularly with the changing climate. So there's areas where the changes are more rapid, is where we're starting to see more and more of the clouds. Alaska is one of those places that we're seeing more and more cloud observations, as well as the Arctic and Antarctica. There's a lot of groups and people that are going there to show what is happening in real time, and they're using the Globe Observer app to take photographs and report. And a lot of those people come back and want to participate even more, because those areas are really seeing the changes very rapidly. So it's global, but these areas with a lot of change right now are increasing in data.
Great. Thank you all again so much for sharing these projects with us. We'll make these resources available on the conference website. There's a resources tab, so we'll add all of these links to that page so you can check them out from home. We encourage you all to sign up for Globe projects, and also to join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for our conversation on community perspectives, which I'm sure will pick up on a lot of these themes. But for now, please join me in thanking our really wonderful speakers. It's been a pleasure chatting with all of you.